Insulin resistance. What is it? Why does it matter? And how do you know you've got it? All right. So insulin is your hormone that is the key that opens the cell, that lets the glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cell for fuel. Now you want that to happen, otherwise you have no fuel. There's two ways. There's insulin dependent and non-insulin dependent mechanisms to get the blood sugar out of your bloodstream. Now, sugar in your bloodstream is super inflammatory, and it will bind with hemoglobin and make this glycolated end product called hemoglobin A1C. So on your labs, you can look at hemoglobin A1C, which is an average of the previous 3 months of blood sugar, because when it's high, you get an elevated level of that. You don't want that. It's super inflammatory to your arteries, okay? When you lose the ability to regulate your insulin over time, your body will actually stop being able to produce it eventually. We call that type 2 diabetes. These things, before you lose all function, can often be reversed. When we see elevated insulin, what you're looking at on your labs is you're looking at a fasting glucose over 100. All right, your body should be able to regulate your glucose when you're fasting between 85 and 100. When it loses the ability to compensate, which happens eventually, right? Before that happens, your blood sugar will stay in range, but you will still have symptoms of insulin resistance and hypoglycemia, blood sugar too low, blood sugar too high. When you lose that ability from fasting blood glucose of over 127 on 3 consecutive blood tests, we call that diabetes. Still can be reversed or managed, okay? I know this is very controversial. Between 100 and 127, we call that pre-diabetic. You're losing your ability to regulate your blood sugar. The second marker that we look at is hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C is the average over 3 months of that spike that happens because it causes that glucose to bind with hemoglobin and make that nasty glycolated end product. The other thing that you can test is called C-peptide. If you're really diabetic, you can see, is your pancreas still working and how hard is it working? We also use something called the HOMA-IR, and that's the insulin to glucose ratio. And you want that below 2 because that's what's going to tell you how hard are you working to regulate your blood sugar. Another indirect measurement is triglycerides. You want your triglycerides to be somewhere around 60 to 100. 100 and over is early insulin resistance. And if it's 200 or over, you absolutely have insulin resistance. That means your body cannot get rid of glucose. It's converting into blood fats, triglycerides, all right? Right. So how do you fix this, right? But you got to really look at the gut. There's a huge piece of the gut in this. I know, gut on everything. It's true. Your gut is the foundation. But you can increase receptor site sensitivity with certain nutrients. We use a product called glycin from Apex that I really like. There's also herbs that you can use to help support the pancreas as well. But I like to focus on cleaning up the root instead of putting a Band-Aid on the system. If you take a good multivitamin, that can be helpful, and you need a really, really high quality CoQ10. That's necessary in the mitochondria to actually make energy as well. So there's a few things.